Her 3-year-old keeps telling strangers, "That's my daddy, the billionaire CEO," he pointed at, has never met them, but has her face tattooed on his chest. "That's my daddy." The small voice pierced through the elegant hum of the charity gala like a stone shattering glass. But it was what happened next that made the impossible become reality. When Dominic Ashford, the billionaire CEO, whose face graced every business magazine in the country, unbuttoned his shirt in front of 300 guests and revealed a woman's face tattooed over his heart, the woman standing before him, the woman he had never met, whispered 4 words that changed everything. "I remember you now." How could a 3-year-old child recognize a father he had never seen? How could a mother forget the man who saved her life? And why would a man tattoo a stranger's face over his heart and spend 4 years searching for her? Stay with me, because what you are about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about fate, memory, and the impossible power of love that transcends time itself. If you believe some connections are meant to be, hit that subscribe button right now. Because this story will prove that the heart remembers what the mind forgets. And if this story moves you, drop a comment telling me whether you believe in destiny. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Isabel Morgan stood at the edge of the grand ballroom, her fingers wrapped tightly around a glass of sparkling water she had no intention of drinking. The Crystal Heights Hotel had outdone itself tonight. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings like frozen waterfalls, casting prismatic light across marble floors. So polished they reflected the designer gowns of women who had never known what it meant to check a price tag. The air smelled of expensive perfume, fresh lilies, and the kind of wealth that made Isabel acutely aware of her vintage cocktail dress from a consignment shop 3 towns over. She should not have come. The invitation had been a courtesy, she knew that. Her former college roommate was marrying into a family that owned half the commercial real estate in the state, and Isabel represented the past that people like that usually tried to forget. The scholarship student who had worked 3 jobs to afford textbooks while others complained about their monthly allowances being insufficient. But Rachel had insisted, begged, actually. "Please come, Isabel. You are the only real friend I have from those days. Everyone else just wants something from me now." And so, Isabel had borrowed a dress, convinced her sister to watch Oliver for the evening, and driven 2 hours to attend a wedding that made her feel like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. "Mommy, I am bored." Isabel looked down at Oliver, whose tiny hand was sticky with the remnants of the 3rd cookie he had charmed from a passing waiter. Her sister had canceled at the last minute, of course, leaving Isabel with no choice but to bring her 3-year-old son to an event where children were clearly an afterthought. Oliver had been remarkably patient so far, entertaining himself with the elaborate floral arrangements and asking the string quartet if they knew any songs about dinosaurs. "I know, sweetheart." Isabel crouched down to his level, smoothing the collar of his miniature suit, the one she had found at a thrift store, and altered herself because renting a toddler tuxedo seemed absurd. "Just a little longer, okay? Then we can go home and watch your pirate movie. But I want to see the pretty lights up close." Oliver pointed toward the stage where preparations were being made for some kind of presentation. "Can we go closer?" The stage had been set up at the far end of the ballroom, a temporary platform with a podium and an elaborate screen for what the program described as a special address from tonight's keynote philanthropist. Isabel had not paid much attention to that part. She had come for Rachel, not to watch wealthy people congratulate themselves for donating money they would never miss. "Okay." Isabel took Oliver's hand. "But we stay in the back, and you have to be very quiet." They wove through the crowd, Isabel murmuring apologies as Oliver's enthusiasm led him to bump into silk skirts and patent leather shoes. She found a spot near one of the marble columns where they could see the stage without being directly in anyone's way. Oliver pressed himself against the cool stone, his dark eyes wide with wonder at the spectacle before him. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the ballroom as a man in an impeccable tuxedo walked onto the stage. Even from a distance, Isabel could sense the shift in the room's energy. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. There was a quality to the attention he commanded that went beyond mere curiosity. It was the kind of presence that made the air itself seem to lean forward in anticipation. "Good evening." His voice carried across the ballroom without effort, deep and controlled, rich with the confidence of someone who had never doubted his right to be heard. I want to thank you all for being here tonight to support the Children's Medical Research Foundation. As many of you know, this cause is personal to me for reasons that go beyond philanthropy. Isabel barely listened as he spoke about research initiatives and funding goals. She was too busy trying to calculate when she could politely extract herself and Oliver from this event and begin the long drive home. Tomorrow was Monday, which meant her shift at the hospital started at 6 in the morning, and she still had not finished the grant proposal that was due by the end of the week. "Mommy," Oliver tugged at her hand. "Mommy, look." "Not now, sweetheart." She kept her voice to a whisper. "The man is talking." "But Mommy." Oliver's voice was more insistent now. "That is my daddy." Isabel felt her stomach drop. Oliver had been doing this lately, pointing at random men and declaring them to be his father. The mailman, the grocery store clerk. Last week, a man waiting for the bus who had looked so alarmed that Isabel had nearly died of embarrassment on the spot. She had tried to explain to Oliver that his father was not around, that sometimes families look different, but at 3 years old, the concept was too abstract. He had decided instead to go searching on his own. "Oliver, no." Isabel tightened her grip on his hand. "That is not your daddy. That is just a man giving a speech." "But it is." Oliver pulled against her grasp with the surprising strength toddlers possessed when they had decided something was absolute truth. "That is my daddy. I know it is." Several people near them turned to look. Isabel felt heat creeping up her neck. "Please, sweetheart, we talked about this. You cannot just point at people and say that." But Oliver was not listening. With the single-minded determination that had gotten him into trouble since he learned to walk, he slipped his hand free from Isabel's grip and ran. Not away from her, but forward, toward the stage, toward the man in the spotlight who was mid-sentence about the importance of early intervention in pediatric care. "Oliver, no." Isabel lunged after him, her heels catching on the marble floor. Around her, guests gasped and moved aside as a 3-year-old in a suit 2 sizes too big barreled through the crowd like a tiny, determined missile. "Stop! Please stop!" But Oliver did not stop. He reached the stage and, with the fearlessness that came from not yet understanding embarrassment or social hierarchies or the difference between a charity gala and a playground, he climbed the steps, 3 risers up before anyone could react. 4, 5, and then he was on the stage, running toward the podium, his small voice carrying across the now silent ballroom with crystal clarity. "Daddy, Daddy, it is me. I found you." The man stopped speaking, mid-word, mid-gesture, mid-breath. His hand, which had been indicating something on the screen behind him, dropped slowly to his side. The ballroom fell into a silence so complete that Isabel could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, could hear the rustle of her dress as she finally reached the stage stairs, could hear the quiet sob that escaped her throat as 300 pairs of eyes turned to watch her humiliation unfold in real time. On stage, the man was staring at Oliver with an expression Isabel could not decipher. Shock, certainly, but there was something else, something that made her legs feel weak and her chest tight. His steel-gray eyes moved from Oliver to the crowd, scanning faces until they found hers. And in that moment, in that terrible, impossible moment, Isabel watched recognition flicker across his face. But that was impossible. She had never seen this man before in her life. She would have remembered those eyes, that face, that presence that seemed to command the very atoms in the air to pay attention. She would have remembered, wouldn't she? "I am so sorry." Isabel reached the stage, her heels clicking against the wood as she rushed to scoop Oliver into her arms. The microphone picked up her breathless apology and broadcast it across the ballroom. "He does this sometimes. He is 3. He does not understand. I am so sorry." She turned to leave, to escape, to disappear into whatever hole the universe would mercifully open up to swallow her whole. But before she could take a step, a single word stopped her. Wait. It was not a request. It was not even a command. It was something softer and more desperate. Something that made Isabel freeze with Oliver squirming in her arms and 300 witnesses watching her decide whether to obey or flee. She turned back slowly. Up close, Dominic Ashford was even more devastating than his photographs suggested. 6'3" of controlled power wrapped in a Tom Ford tuxedo that probably cost more than 6 months of a rent. His dark hair was styled with the kind of casual precision that required both expensive products and genetic luck. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, his shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of the empire he had built from nothing. But it was his eyes that held her captive. Gray like a winter storm, gray like smoke, gray like the moment before rain, and currently fixed on her with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. "What is your name?" His voice was low, controlled, but Isabel detected something underneath it. A tremor, a crack in that famous composure. "Isabel." The word came out as barely a whisper. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Isabel Morgan." "Listen, Mr. Ashford. I really am sorry. Oliver has an overactive imagination, and he has been asking about his father lately, and I think he just saw you on stage and decided that you show me your left shoulder." The request was so unexpected, so bizarrely specific, that Isabel actually laughed. A short, nervous sound that died quickly when she saw his face. "Excuse me? Your left shoulder." His eyes never left hers. "Please, I need to see it." Around them, the ballroom had descended into chaos. Whispers spread like wildfire. Phones emerged from expensive clutches and jacket pockets. Somewhere, someone was already typing frantically, no doubt crafting the tweet that would make this the most viral charity gala in history. "Local nobody crashes Billionaire's event. Child claims paternity. You will not believe what happened next. Mr. Ashford, I really think we should just—" Isabel tried again, but he interrupted her. "Please." The word cracked. Something in his carefully constructed facade splintered, and for just a moment, Isabel saw past the billionaire, past the CEO, past the man who had built a tech empire before his 30th birthday. She saw desperation, raw and unfiltered and completely at odds with everything the world thought it knew about Dominic Ashford. "I have been searching for 4 years. 4 years. And if I am wrong, I will apologize, and you will never see me again. I will donate $1 million to any charity you name, and pretend this never happened. But if I am right," he trailed off, his jaw clenching so hard Isabel could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "If I am right, then everything changes. Just show me your shoulder, please." Something in his voice, in the naked need behind his words, made Isabel nod. She was aware of the cameras, the whispers, the fact that whatever happened next would follow her for the rest of her life. But there was something in his eyes that bypassed logic and reason and spoke directly to a part of her she did not understand. With trembling fingers, she shifted Oliver to one hip. He had gone quiet now, watching the interaction with the solemn attention children reserved for moments they sensed were important. Isabel reached up and slowly slid the thin strap of her dress down her left shoulder, revealing the skin just below her collarbone. The birthmark had been there since she was born, shaped like a phoenix in flight, its distinctive pattern spreading across her skin, in shades of brown, that her mother used to say looked like flames frozen in time. "My little phoenix," her mother would call her, destined for transformation, destined to rise from ashes. Dominic Ashford made a sound like he had been punched in the stomach. His hand reached out, fingers hovering just above her skin without making contact, tracing the outline of the birthmark in the air, as if he were afraid she might disappear if he touched her. "It is you." His voice was barely audible. "My God, it is really you." Before Isabel could respond, before she could ask what he meant or demand an explanation, or do anything besides stand there with her dress slipping off her shoulder and her son in her arms, Dominic was moving. He shrugged off his tuxedo jacket, letting it fall to the stage floor with complete disregard for the garment that had probably cost more than her car. His hands moved to his bow tie, loosening it with fingers that shook despite his attempts at control. "What are you doing?" Isabel hissed, acutely aware of the hundreds of eyes on them, the dozens of phones recording every second of this disaster. "Mr. Ashford, please, this is not something I should have done 4 years ago." He unbuttoned the top button of his shirt, then the second, then the third. His eyes never left hers as he pulled the crisp white fabric aside, revealing his chest. And there, tattooed over his heart in exquisite detail, was her face. Isabel's vision blurred. The ballroom tilted. somewhere far away. She heard gasps, heard exclamations, heard the rapid-fire clicking of camera shutters. But all she could focus on was the image inked into Dominic Ashford's skin. Not just any rendering of her face. It was her exactly as she looked right now. The slight upturn of her nose that she had always been self-conscious about. The way her left eyebrow arched higher than her right when she was confused. The small scar above her lip from when she had fallen off her bike at 7 years old. But more than the physical details, it was the expression. She was laughing in the image, eyes crinkled with genuine joy, caught in a moment of pure, unguarded happiness. A moment she had no memory of experiencing. I do not understand. The words came out as barely a whisper, even as Oliver squirmed in her arms, reaching toward Dominic with both hands. Daddy has Mommy on his chest. Oliver announced it with the pleased confidence of a toddler who had just solved a complex puzzle. See? I told you he was my daddy. Dominic's eyes were swimming with something Isabel could not name. Grief, joy, relief, a desperate hope that looked painful to contain. 4 years ago, there was an accident, a car crash on Highway 9. Do you remember? Isabel's heart stuttered. She did remember. Vaguely. She had been driving home from her sister's wedding, arguing with someone on the phone. She could not remember who or why. Just the anger, the frustration, the way her hands had gripped the steering wheel too tight. And then nothing. Darkness. She had woken up in the hospital 3 days later with a concussion, bruised ribs, and a memory full of holes the doctors said might never fill back in. Temporary amnesia was common with head trauma, they had told her. Most memories would return eventually. Some never would. The brain was mysterious that way. You were there? Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant and hollow. I pulled you from your car 30 seconds before it exploded. Each word seemed to cost him something. His voice was rough, scraped raw. You were unconscious, bleeding from a head wound. I rode in the ambulance with you, held your hand while they worked on you. And in the hospital, before they took you for surgery, you woke up, just for maybe 30 seconds. He paused, his hand pressed against the tattoo, against her face permanently inked over his heart. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper, but in the silent ballroom, every word carried. You looked at me and smiled like you had known me your whole life. You said, "Find me when I wake up. Promise you will find me." Then you told me your name, just your first name, Isabel. You said you had a birthmark shaped like a phoenix. Right there. He gestured to her shoulder. You touched my face, ran your fingers down my cheek, and said I had kind eyes. You said you would remember me. Even if you forgot everything else, you would remember me. And then you were gone again. Back under. They wheeled you away for surgery, and I waited. I waited 3 days at that hospital, sleeping in waiting room chairs and drinking terrible coffee and refusing to leave until I could see you again. Isabel felt the ballroom tilting, felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. This could not be real, could not be happening. But the tattoo was there. The phoenix birthmark was there. And somewhere in the locked-away corners of her damaged memory, something was stirring. A feeling more than an image. Safety, warmth. The sensation of a hand holding hers when she had been drowning in pain and fear. But I do not remember any of that. The confession felt like failure, like losing something precious she had never known she had. I know. Dominic's voice was gentle now, almost tender. I waited at the hospital for 3 days, but your family would not let me see you. They said you had a boyfriend. They said you did not need some stranger, confusing you while you recovered. I tried to explain, tried to tell them about the 30 seconds before surgery, but they thought I was delusional. Traumatized by witnessing the accident, they had security escort me out. He drew in a shaky breath. By the time I finally convinced them to let me visit, you had already been discharged. They would not tell me where you had gone. Patient confidentiality. Your sister told me to stop looking for you, that you were safe and recovering, and I needed to move on with my life. She said it like I was a stalker, like I had invented the whole thing. So, you tattooed my face on your chest? The absurdity of it should have been laughable, should have been the act of an unhinged mind. But the intensity in his eyes, the raw vulnerability in his expression, made it feel like the most romantic gesture in the world. I tattooed you on my chest because 30 seconds with you changed my entire life. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but the microphone caught it and broadcast it across the ballroom, across the phones recording this moment, across the gulf of 4 years and lost memories that separated them. I have built empires. I have closed billion-dollar deals. I have been called a genius by people who matter, but nothing has ever felt as right as holding your hand in that ambulance. You looked at me like I was someone worth being kind to, not just someone worth using. And I have been searching for you ever since. The ballroom was silent except for the sound of Isabel's ragged breathing. Around them, 300 people had become spectators to something that felt too intimate, too raw to be witnessed. But Isabel could not look away from Dominic's face, could not process what he was saying, could not reconcile this story with the blank spaces in her memory. That is crazy. She breathed the words more than spoke them. But even as she said it, something was stirring in the depths of her consciousness. Not a memory, not exactly, but a feeling, the ghost of sensation, strong arms lifting her. A voice in the darkness saying, "Stay with me." Gray eyes that promise safety. Is it? Dominic asked softly. Or is it two people who found something worth fighting for, even when the universe tried to tear them apart? I hired investigators. After your family refused to help me, I hired the best private investigators money could buy. I gave them everything I had. Your first name, the Phoenix birthmark, the approximate date of the accident, the hospital you were taken to. They found 17 Isabels, with Phoenix-shaped birthmarks. 17. I met every single one of them, showed them my tattoo, asked if they remembered an accident on Highway 9. None of them were you. His voice cracked. I was starting to think I had imagined you, that the trauma of witnessing the accident had made me create some perfect moment that never existed. My therapist suggested it. Said maybe I had projected meaning onto a random act of heroism because I needed to feel like my life had purpose beyond making money. But I could not let it go. I could not forget the way you looked at me, the way you smiled, the promise you made me swear to keep. And then tonight I am standing on this stage talking about pediatric research, and I hear a child's voice call me daddy. And I look down, and there is this little boy with dark hair and eyes that look like mine when I was his age. And he is pointing at me with absolute certainty, like he knows something the rest of the world does not. And then I see you, standing there, trying to apologize, trying to disappear, and I see the edge of your dress strap, and I think, please God, let me be right. Let this not be another dead end. Oliver, who had been remarkably patient during this exchange, reached out and patted Dominic's cheek with one small hand. You found us, Daddy. His voice was satisfied, like this had always been inevitable. Mommy said you would find us. I never said that. Isabel protested weakly. But even as the words left her mouth, they felt like a lie. Had not she said something like that? In dreams she dismissed as fantasy. In moments of weakness when Oliver asked about his father, and she found herself saying, "He is out there somewhere, searching for us." But that was impossible. Oliver's father was. The thought dissolved before it could fully form, leaving only a strange blankness where a memory should be. Who is Oliver's father? Dominic asked quietly, as if he could read the confusion on her face. Isabel started, then stopped. She tried to picture him, this mystery man who had supposedly fathered her child. But there was nothing, no face, no name, just a vague sense of someone who had never quite been real. I do not remember. The admission felt like madness, like something fundamentally broken in her brain. I know that sounds insane. I know it does. But I cannot picture him. I just know I was pregnant when I woke up in the hospital. The doctors said it must have happened before the accident. My sister said I had mentioned dating someone. But she trailed off, looking at Oliver's sweet face, then back at Dominic. But I do not actually remember him at all. Not his name, not his face, not anything about him. It is like trying to remember a dream after you wake up. You know it happened, but you cannot quite grasp it. Dominic's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly to track. Hope, fear, desperate calculation. The accident was 4 years ago. Oliver is 3. The math hit Isabel like a physical blow. Oh my God. In the hospital, Dominic continued, his voice shaking now. Before you went into surgery, you kissed me. You pulled me down and kissed me like it was the last thing you would ever do. And you said, I will remember you. Even if I forget everything else, I will remember you. Tears were streaming down Isabel's face now, though she could not have said why. Her body seemed to be reacting to something her mind had not caught up to yet. But I did not remember. I do not remember. Your heart remembered. He gestured to Oliver, who had laid his head on Dominic's shoulder as if he had done it 1,000 times before. He knows me. Look at him. He knows me. And it was true. Oliver, who had never been comfortable with strangers, who had hidden behind Isabel's legs at every new introduction for his entire life, was melting into Dominic's chest like he had finally come home. His small hand clutched Dominic's shirt. His breathing had evened out into the peaceful rhythm of a child who felt safe. This is insane, Isabel whispered. This does not happen in real life. People do not meet for 30 seconds and conceive a child and spend years searching for each other. That is not how the world works. Is it not? Dominic's hand finally made contact. His fingers were gentle as they traced the phoenix birthmark on her shoulder. The touch sent electricity through Isabel's entire body, waking something that had been sleeping. Because I have spent 4 years building an empire I do not care about, attending parties that mean nothing, and sleeping in an empty bed with your face tattooed over my heart. I have been half alive, waiting for the other half to find me. And now she is here, holding our son, looking at me like she might remember. I do not remember. Isabel protested. But even as she said it, fragments were surfacing. Not images. Not yet. But sensations. The smell of antiseptic and fear. Strong hands holding hers. A voice saying, "Stay with me. Please. Stay with me." Gray eyes that promised safety when she had been drowning in pain. "Kiss me," Dominic said suddenly. "Right now, in front of all these people with their cameras and their judgment. Kiss me. And tell me you feel nothing. Tell me it is all a mistake. Tell me that Oliver calling me daddy is just a coincidence. Tell me that this," he pressed his hand against the tattoo, "is just the obsession of a madman. Kiss me and prove me wrong." Isabel should have refused, should have grabbed Oliver and run from this beautiful, impossible man who claimed she had changed his life in 30 seconds. Should have protected herself from the inevitable heartbreak when this fairy tale crumbled under the weight of reality. Should have been the practical, cautious woman that 4 years of single motherhood had forced her to become. Instead, she found herself leaning in. Their lips met, and the world exploded. If you are feeling the chills right now, drop a comment telling me you believe in impossible love. And if this story is already breaking your heart in the best way, hit that like button because you will not believe what Isabel remembers when they kiss. Do not go anywhere. The truth about their connection is about to be revealed, and it will leave you speechless. Memories crashed over Isabel like a tidal wave. Not gentle, not gradual, but all at once, drowning her in images and sensations she had locked away in the broken corners of her mind. The accident, metal twisting, glass shattering, her car spinning, and she was screaming. And then the impact that made everything go white, pain everywhere, the taste of blood, smoke filling her lungs, and then arms. Strong arms reaching through the wreckage, a voice cutting through her panic. "I've got you. You are safe now. Stay with me. Please stay with me." She remembered being pulled from the car. Remembered the way the man with gray eyes had cradled her against his chest, even as flames began licking at the vehicle behind them. Remembered how he had not let go, not when the paramedics arrived, not when they loaded her onto the stretcher. He had climbed into the ambulance with her, his hand wrapped around hers, and she remembered thinking through the haze of pain that this stranger's grip was the only thing tethering her to consciousness. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and urgent voices, but she remembered his voice above all the others. "You are going to be okay. I promise. You are going to be okay." And every time she started to slip under, started to let the darkness take her, his grip would tighten and she would fight to stay. The hospital. Fluorescent lights too bright. Voices talking about her like she was not there. CT scans and possible internal bleeding, and we need to get her into surgery now. And then, in that moment before they wheeled her away, she had surfaced, just for 30 seconds, maybe less. She remembered opening her eyes and seeing him there. The man who had pulled her from the fire. He was still holding her hand. His face was smudged with ash. There was a cut above his eyebrow that no one had bothered to clean because he had refused to leave her side. And when he saw her eyes open, when he saw her looking at him, his expression had transformed into something so raw and vulnerable that it had made her chest ache. "You are awake." His voice had cracked. "Thank God. You are going to be okay. They're going to take care of you." And she had smiled. Why had she smiled? She could remember it now. Remember the feeling spreading through her chest despite the pain. This man had saved her life. This beautiful stranger, with kind eyes, had pulled her from a burning car and stayed with her. Had held her hand like it mattered. Like she mattered. "What is your name?" she had asked, her voice barely working. "Dominic." He had leaned closer. "Dominic Ashford." "Isabel." She remembered trying to lift her free hand, remembered how heavy it had felt. "Isabel Morgan. I have a birthmark, shaped like a phoenix, left shoulder. You should remember that." "Why?" he had asked gently, like he was humoring a confused patient. "Because you are going to find me when I wake up." She had been so certain of it, could remember the certainty flowing through her veins like medicine. "You have to promise. Promise you will find me." "I promise." He had said it without hesitation. "I will find you." And then she had done something that made no sense. Something she could remember now with perfect clarity. She had pulled him down, had used what little strength she had to bring his face close to hers, and she had kissed him, had kissed this stranger like he was oxygen, and she was drowning. Had poured everything she was feeling into that kiss. The gratitude, the inexplicable connection, the bone-deep certainty that this moment mattered in ways she could not articulate. When she pulled back, she had touched his face, traced the line of his jaw with trembling fingers. "You have kind eyes. I will remember you. Even if I forget everything else, I will remember you." Those had been her last words before the anesthesia took her under. But she had not remembered, not consciously, the surgery, the 3 days of medically induced coma. When she had finally woken, her memory had been full of holes. The doctor said it was normal. Her family said she needed to focus on recovery, not on trying to remember traumatic events. Her sister had been particularly insistent. "You do not need to dwell on the accident, Isabel. You are alive. That is what matters. Move forward." And Isabel had tried, had focused on healing, on learning she was pregnant, on being confused because she could not remember being with anyone. But the dates lined up, and her sister said she had mentioned dating someone before the accident, so it must have happened, right? Memory was tricky after head trauma. Except now, standing on a stage with Dominic Ashford's lips on hers and his son in her arms, and 4 years of missing pieces suddenly clicking into place, Isabel remembered something else. Something that made her pull back, gasping. "You came to my apartment." The words tumbled out. 8 months after the accident. "You found me." Dominic's eyes widened. "You remember that? I thought I dreamed you." Isabel was shaking now. Full body tremors that had nothing to do with cold. "I thought my brain had invented you to cope with the trauma. But you were real. You were there. And we." She glanced at Oliver, who had fallen asleep against Dominic's shoulder, and lowered her voice. "And then you were gone in the morning. I woke up alone, and I convinced myself it had all been a grief-induced hallucination. Some elaborate fantasy my damaged brain created because I was lonely and scared and trying to make sense of being pregnant with no memory of how it happened. I got a call." Dominic's free hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away tears she had not realized she was crying. "An emergency with the company. A hostile takeover I had been fighting for months. Everything was falling apart, and I had to go. I left a note with my number. I told you I would be back that evening. I told you we needed to talk, that I had been searching for you, that I thought you might be the woman from the accident. When I came back 6 hours later, you were gone. The apartment was empty. Your neighbors said you had moved. No forwarding address. No way to contact you. It was like you had vanished into thin air all over again. My sister made me move." The memory was crystallizing now, sharp and clear. She found the note. I was in the shower, and she went through my things, and she found your note with your name and number. When I came out, she told me I was being stalked. She said some rich man had become obsessed with me after the accident, that he had somehow tracked me down, and I needed to leave immediately for my own safety." Isabel felt horror dawning as more pieces fell into place. She threw away the note. She said you were dangerous. That billionaires did not just show up at random women's apartments unless they were unhinged. I was so confused. My memory was still so fragmented. I had thought the night before was a dream, and she was so convincing, and I was scared, oh my God. She knew. She knew who you were, and she deliberately separated us. The ballroom had been silent during this exchange. 300 people witnessing a reunion that should have been private. But now someone started clapping, slow at first, then faster. Others joined in. Within seconds, the applause was thunderous. There were people crying, cameras flashing. Someone shouted, "Say yes." Though to what? Isabel had no idea. She thought she was protecting you, Dominic said, though his jaw was clenched so tight it looked painful. She saw a billionaire with a tattoo of your face and thought I was unhinged. She was not entirely wrong, Isabel said with a watery laugh. This is pretty unhinged, is it? Dominic's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, catching another tear. Or is it two people who found something worth fighting for, even when the universe tried to tear them apart? Oliver stirred between them, his small hand reaching up to pat both their faces without opening his eyes. Daddy found us. His voice was drowsy with satisfaction. Can we go home now? Where is home, buddy? Dominic asked gently. Oliver's eyes opened, confused by the question. With you. Home is with you. Isabel watched the emotion play across Dominic's face. Wonder, joy, and a desperate love that made her chest ache with its intensity. This man, this stranger who was not a stranger at all, had spent 4 years searching for her, had tattooed her face over his heart, had recognized their son on sight with a conviction that defied every law of logic and probability. I have a house, she heard herself saying. A small house across town, 3 bedrooms, a backyard for Oliver. It is not much, nothing like what you are probably used to, but is there room for me? The vulnerability in his voice broke something inside her. Here was a man who commanded boardrooms and built empires, reduced to asking if there was space for him in a small house with a woman who had forgotten him and a son he had just met. There has always been room for you, Isabel whispered, finally understanding the truth of it. I have been setting 3 places at the table for 2 years. Oliver keeps asking who the extra plate is for, and I keep telling him I do not know. But I was waiting for you. We were both waiting for you. Around them, the charity gala had dissolved into chaos. Guests were crying openly now. Cameras were flashing like a meteor shower. Somewhere a string quartet had started playing a love song that felt almost too perfect, like the universe itself was providing a soundtrack to this impossible reunion. But Isabel barely noticed any of it. Her entire world had narrowed to the man holding their son and looking at her like she had hung every star in the sky. I need you to understand something, Dominic said, his voice rough with emotion. I am not easy to love. I work too much. I have trust issues that would make a therapist weep. I have built walls so high that most people cannot even see the top. I have spent 4 years obsessing over a woman I met for 30 seconds, and that is probably not healthy by any clinical definition. But for you, for him, he nodded at Oliver. I will tear down every single brick. I will learn to leave work at the office. I will go to therapy. I will do whatever it takes to be the man you both deserve. You already are, Isabel said simply. You spent 4 years searching for someone you met for 30 seconds. You tattooed my face over your heart. You built an empire while keeping space in your life for a ghost. You are already everything we need. Marry me. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and perfect and terrifying. We just met, Isabel protested weakly. Or re-met, or whatever this is. I do not even know if I believe this is real. We created a life together. Dominic gestured to Oliver, still sleeping peacefully against his shoulder. We have been searching for each other across time and memory and deliberate sabotage. We have set places at tables and tattooed faces, and raised a son who recognized his father on sight. If that is not enough foundation for forever, I do not know what is. He had a point. A completely insane, utterly illogical point that somehow made perfect sense in a world where 3-year-olds could recognize fathers they had never met, and tattoos could serve as roadmaps back to lost love. I do not even know your middle name, Isabel said. Alexander. The answer came without hesitation. I hate mushrooms. I sleep on the left side of the bed. I cry during sad movies, even though I pretend I do not. I will make your coffee exactly right every morning, and I will read bedtime stories in funny voices until my throat hurts. I will love you until the sun burns out, and I will spend every day proving that 30 seconds was enough to see forever. Oliver lifted his head from Dominic's shoulder, suddenly awake. Say yes, Mommy. I like him. Isabel looked at her son, their son, and saw nothing but certainty in his young face. He knew, the same way she was starting to remember, to understand, that some connections transcended logic. Some love stories did not follow the rules that society had written. Some people were meant to find each other, no matter how many obstacles the universe placed in their path. Yes, she whispered. Then, louder, so that every person in the ballroom could hear, so that every camera could record it, so that the universe itself could bear witness. Yes. Dominic kissed her again, and this time the ballroom erupted. Not just applause, but cheering, whooping, the kind of joyful noise that happens when people witness something they will tell their grandchildren about, when they see proof that fairy tales can happen to real people in real life. But Isabel barely heard it over the sound of her own heart finally beating in rhythm with someone else's. When they pulled apart, Dominic was smiling. The first real smile she had seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look younger, more vulnerable, more human, like the walls he had mentioned were already starting to crumble. Can we go now? Oliver asked. I am sleepy, and I want to show Daddy my pirate ship. We can go, Dominic said. But first, I need to finish my speech. He turned to face the ballroom, still holding Oliver in one arm and reaching for Isabel's hand with the other. The crowd quieted instantly, 300 people leaning forward to hear what would happen next. I came here tonight to talk about the Children's Medical Research Foundation, about the importance of funding pediatric care and early intervention programs. But I think I just learned something more important than any speech I could have prepared. He paused, his thumb rubbing circles on Isabel's hand. I spent 4 years building an empire. I told myself it was necessary, that success required sacrifice, that I could not afford to be distracted by emotion or connection or anything that might slow me down on the path to the top. And I convinced myself I was happy, that the emptiness was just the price of achievement. But tonight, I found what I had been missing. Not just the woman I fell in love with in 30 seconds 4 years ago. Not just the son I did not know I had. But the understanding that success without someone to share it with is just another word for loneliness. His voice grew stronger. So, I am going to do something I have never done before. I am going to ask for help. I am going to delegate. I am going to trust my team to run this company while I learn how to be a father and a partner. I am going to work reasonable hours and take weekends off and miss meetings that are not actually emergencies. Because I just got a second chance at something more valuable than any business deal I could ever close, and I am not going to waste it. The applause this time was different. Slower. More thoughtful. Like people were actually hearing him, actually considering what he was saying about their own lives and priorities. Now, Dominic's smile was almost sheepish. I was supposed to announce a $10 million donation to the foundation tonight. But I am feeling generous, and I think my future wife deserves a proper engagement present. So I am making it $50 million, to be distributed over the next 5 years for pediatric trauma research, with a specific focus on helping accident victims and their families. The ballroom exploded again. Isabel felt her knees go weak. $50 million, said as casually as someone else might offer to buy dinner. You cannot just, she started, but Dominic interrupted her. I can, and I did. Consider it a thank you to the universe for bringing you back to me. Now, let us get our son home. They walked off the stage together, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. People reached out to touch them as they passed, to offer congratulations, to capture just one more photo of the most romantic moment any of them had ever witnessed. Isabel caught sight of Rachel, the bride, who was crying and mouthing, "Oh my God." Marcus, the groom, was shaking his head in disbelief, but grinning like he had just witnessed a miracle. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. The city stretched out below them, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Dominic's car was waiting, not a limousine, but a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Isabel's yearly salary. The driver opened the door without comment, as if his boss emerging from galas with a sleeping child and a fiancée he had met an hour ago was completely normal. "Where's your car?" Dominic asked as he carefully buckled Oliver into the car seat that mysteriously appeared from the trunk, perfectly sized, perfectly installed, like the universe had been preparing for this moment. Isabel gestured vaguely toward the parking garage. "Over there, but I can drive myself home." "Isabel." Dominic turned to face her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I just found you after 4 years. I just discovered I have a son. Do you honestly think I am going to let you drive away without me? Give my driver your keys. He will have your car delivered to your house tomorrow. Tonight, you are coming with me." "Where are we going?" "Wherever you want," he said simply. "Your house, my penthouse, a hotel. I do not care, as long as we are together." "My house," Isabel decided. "Oliver needs his own bed, and I need to see you in my space. To make this feel real, then your house it is." The drive across town should have been awkward. Two people who barely knew each other, a sleeping child between them, the weight of 4 years and impossible circumstances pressing down like atmosphere. But instead, it felt natural. Dominic asked questions about Oliver, what he liked to eat, whether he was afraid of the dark, if he had friends at preschool, and Isabel found herself answering easily, watching this powerful man transform into someone softer, more uncertain, more human as he learned about his son. "He loves pirates," she said, "obsessed with them. He has this plastic sword he takes everywhere, and he makes me walk the plank at least twice a day." "Pirates?" Dominic smiled. "I can work with that. I was more into dinosaurs as a kid, but pirates have merit." He also asks approximately 4,000 questions per day, Isabel warned. About everything. Why is the sky blue? Where do clouds come from? What happens when you die? Why do some people not have homes? He does not understand that I do not have all the answers. "Good," Dominic said. "A curious mind is a gift. I will help with the questions. Even the hard ones? Especially the hard ones." Isabel's house looked smaller than ever when they pulled up. A modest 2-bedroom bungalow in a neighborhood that was trying hard to be middle class. The paint was chipping in places. The lawn needed mowing. The fence had a section that was leaning at an angle she kept meaning to fix, but never seemed to have time for. Next to Dominic in his $1,000 tuxedo, emerging from a car that cost more than her mortgage, it felt almost embarrassing. But Dominic did not seem to notice. He carefully lifted Oliver from the car seat, cradling him against his chest with the natural grace of someone who had been meant to hold children all along. Isabel fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking, and finally got the door open. Inside, her house was exactly as she had left it. Toys scattered across the living room floor. Dishes in the sink from breakfast. Oliver's drawings covering the refrigerator. A life laid bare in its ordinary chaos. "His room is upstairs," Isabel whispered. "Second door on the right." "Show me." She led him up the narrow staircase, hyper-aware of how small everything must seem to someone who probably lived in a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and designer furniture. But Dominic did not comment. He simply followed her into Oliver's room, taking in the pirate-themed bedding, and the glow in the dark stars on the ceiling, and the overflowing bookshelf and the plastic sword propped in the corner. "This is perfect," he said softly. "This is exactly what a 3-year-old's room should look like." He laid Oliver down gently, removing his tiny shoes and loosening his collar. Isabel handed him pajamas, and together they changed their sleeping son, working in sync like they had done this 1,000 times before. When Oliver was finally tucked in, Dominic stood there for a long moment, just looking down at him. "He is beautiful." His voice was thick. "He looks like you. He looks like you," Isabel countered. "He has your chin, your eyes, even the way he tilts his head when he is thinking. Then he got the best of both of us." They stood there in the dark room, watching their son sleep, and Isabel felt the weight of 4 years pressing down. 4 years Oliver had lived without his father. 4 years Dominic had searched. 4 years she had struggled alone, convinced she had somehow gotten pregnant by a man she could not remember, too ashamed to admit to anyone that she had no memory of Oliver's conception. "I am sorry," she whispered. I am so sorry you missed his first steps, his first words, his first everything. I did not know. I did not remember. But I am still sorry. Dominic turned to her, his face barely visible in the dim light from the hallway. Do not apologize for something that was not your fault. Your sister made choices that hurt all of us, but she thought she was protecting you. And you survived. You raised our son alone. You gave him a home full of love and pirates and 4,000 questions a day. You did not fail anyone, Isabel. You kept him safe until I could find you. The tears came then. 4 years of exhaustion and loneliness and wondering if she was enough. 4 years of seeing other children with their fathers and feeling like she had somehow robbed Oliver of something essential. 4 years of setting 3 places at the table and not understanding why. It all crashed over her at once, and suddenly she was sobbing, and Dominic was pulling her out of Oliver's room and into the hallway, holding her while she broke apart. I was so alone. The words came between gasping breaths, and I could not tell anyone how alone I was because I did not understand it myself. I kept having these dreams about someone searching for me, and I would wake up crying, and I did not know why. And my sister kept telling me I needed to move on, to date, to give Oliver a father figure. But I could not. I could not let anyone close because they all felt wrong, and I thought I was broken. I thought the accident had damaged something fundamental in me. You are not broken. Dominic held her tighter. You were remembering. Your heart was remembering even when your mind could not. And you were not alone. I was searching. Every single day. I was searching. How did you stand it? She pulled back to look at his face. How did you keep going when everyone thought you were crazy? Because the alternative was giving up. And I could not give up on the woman who looked at me like I was worth saving, who kissed me like I mattered, who made me promise to find her. I built an empire searching for you, Isabel. Every achievement, every success. It was all just marking time until I could fulfill that promise. They stood in the narrow hallway of her modest house, and Isabel felt something shift inside her. The last wall crumbling, the final defense falling. This man had tattooed her face over his heart and spent 4 years searching, had recognized their son on sight, had proposed marriage in front of 300 people without hesitation, had just donated $50 million as an engagement present. And now he was standing in her hallway, holding her while she cried, looking at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. Stay. The word came out before she could think better of it. Tonight. Stay with us tonight. Are you sure? No, she admitted. I am terrified. This is happening so fast. And I barely remember you. And this is insane by any rational measure. But Oliver was right. You are his daddy. And I think maybe you were supposed to be here. In this house. With us. Setting the 3rd place at the table. Then I will stay. Isabel showed him to the guest room, which was really just her home office, with a futon that she sometimes napped on when Oliver napped, and she was too exhausted to make it to her own bed. It was not fancy. The futon was probably 10 years old and had a spring that poked through the thin mattress. But Dominic looked at it like it was the presidential suite at a 5-star hotel. This is perfect, he said. Thank you for letting me stay. I should thank you, she said, for not giving up, for searching, for keeping your promise. I always keep my promises. They stood there awkwardly. 2 people who had created a child together, but barely knew each other's last names. Isabel knew she should leave, go to her own room, give them both space to process everything that had happened. But her feet would not move. She found herself studying his face in the dim hallway light, trying to reconcile this man with the fragmentary memories that were slowly surfacing. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Anything. That night, 8 months after the accident, when you found my apartment, what happened? Dominic leaned against the doorframe, his expression distant, like he was traveling back in time. I had finally gotten a lead from one of my investigators, and Isabel Morgan, who had been in an accident on Highway 9, admitted to the same hospital on the same night. He had tracked you to an apartment complex across town. I showed up at your door at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday, and when you opened it, I thought I was going to pass out. Why? Because you were more beautiful than I remembered, and you were clearly pregnant, and you looked at me like I was a stranger, and I realized that you really did not remember. The doctors had said you might not. Traumatic amnesia. But I had hoped. God, I had hoped. What did you say? I told you who I was. Told you about the accident. Showed you my tattoo, and you looked at me like I was insane, but you also looked at me like something was familiar. Like your body recognized me even if your mind did not. You asked me to come in. Said you wanted to hear the story. So I told you everything. The accident, the ambulance ride, the 30 seconds before surgery, the promise. And you cried. You said you had been having dreams about the accident, but they were fragmented and confusing. You said your family told you not to dwell on it, but you could not help it because there were these blank spaces in your memory that felt important. You touched my face the same way you had in the hospital, and you said, I feel like I should know you. His voice grew softer. I asked about the baby. You said you did not know who the father was, that you had woken up pregnant with no memory of how it happened. Your sister told you that you must have been dating someone before the accident, but you could not remember him, could not remember his name or his face or anything about him. And I realized that maybe that night in the hospital was not the only time we were together. What do you mean? I mean that I found you once before. 3 months after the accident. I tracked you down to a different apartment. You were confused, disoriented from the medications you were on. But you let me in, and we talked for hours. And when I left, you kissed me, pulled me back and kissed me like you were trying to remember something just out of reach. I came back the next day, and you were gone. Your neighbor said you had moved again. Your sister was helping you, he said, keeping you safe from people who might take advantage of your condition. Isabel felt her stomach drop. That is when we conceived Oliver, yes. You were 3 months along when I found you again. 8 months after the accident. And when I put the pieces together, when I realized what must have happened, I asked if I could be part of it. Part of your life, part of the baby's life. And you said yes. You said you did not remember me, but something about me felt right, safe, like coming home. Then why did you leave? The hostile takeover. Dominic's jaw clenched. I had been fighting it for months, and that morning, everything came to a head. My second in command called at 5 a.m. in a panic. If I did not get to the office immediately, I was going to lose my company. I left you sleeping. I wrote a note explaining everything, left my personal number, told you I would be back that evening and we would figure this out together. But my sister found the note first and convinced you I was dangerous, that rich men did not just show up at random women's apartments unless they were stalking them. She had you moved before I got back. And this time, she covered your tracks so well that even my investigators could not find you. You just disappeared. Isabel sank down onto the futon, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. My sister, she meant well. She has always been overprotective. Our parents died when I was 20, and she took over that role. She thought she was keeping me safe. I know. Dominic sat down beside her. I do not blame her. If I saw someone show up at my vulnerable sister's apartment with a tattoo of her face and a story about true love after 30 seconds, I would probably think he was unhinged too. But she cost us 4 years. She cost us 4 years. He agreed. But she also kept you safe. Kept you and Oliver healthy and alive until I could find you again. So maybe it was not all bad. Maybe the universe knew we needed time. You needed to heal. Oliver needed to grow strong. And I needed to build something stable enough to deserve you. Do you really believe that? That the universe has a plan? I believe that you promised me you would remember. That you told me to find you. And tonight, our 3-year-old son pointed at me in a room full of strangers and called me daddy. So yes, I believe some things are meant to be. They sat in silence for a moment, shoulders touching on the narrow futon. Outside, the city hummed with its late-night rhythm. Inside Oliver's room, she could hear their son's steady breathing. And here, in this small space, Isabel felt something she had not experienced in 4 years. Peace. I am still terrified, she admitted. Good. Dominic reached for her hand. I am terrified too. Terrified I will mess this up. Terrified I will not be the father Oliver needs. Terrified you will wake up tomorrow and realize this is all too insane and push me away. But I am more terrified of losing you again than I am of anything else. We are going to have to tell my sister. The thought made Isabel's stomach churn. Yes, she's going to have opinions. I imagine she will. Strong opinions. Isabel. Dominic turned to face her, his hand gentle under her chin. I do not care what your sister thinks. I do not care what anyone thinks. I care about you and Oliver. That is it. If your sister cannot accept that, then we will have boundaries. But I am not letting anyone separate us again. She sabotaged us. She thought she was protecting you. There is a difference. But yes, we will need to have a very long conversation with her about respecting your choices and trusting your judgment. Isabel leaned her head against his shoulder, exhaustion finally catching up to her. It had been the longest night of her life. She had gone from being a single mother struggling to make ends meet to being engaged to a billionaire she did not remember. From thinking her son's father was a blank space in her broken memory to learning he had spent 4 years tattooed with her face, searching. What time is it? She asked. Almost midnight. Oliver will be up at 6. He is an early riser. Then you should get some sleep. So should you? I will. Dominic pressed a kiss to the top of her head. In a minute. I just want to sit here for a while and remember that this is real. That I found you. That you said yes. I did say yes, did I not? In front of 300 witnesses and probably 1,000,000 people online by now. Oh God. Isabel sat up. The video. Everyone was recording. This is going to be everywhere. Probably. Does that bother you? Isabel thought about it. About tomorrow's headlines. About the gossip and speculation and inevitable scrutiny. About her quiet life being ripped open for public consumption. And she found, surprisingly, that she did not care as much as she thought she would. No, she said finally. Let them see. Let the whole world know that we found each other. Maybe someone else will see it and decide to fight for their own impossible love story. That is remarkably optimistic coming from someone who was ready to flee the gala an hour ago. An hour ago, I did not remember. Now I do. And remembering changes everything. She stood, knowing if she did not leave now, she never would. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we figure out the logistics. Tonight, we just breathe. Isabel. She turned back. Thank you. For setting the third place. For waiting even when you did not know you were waiting. For raising our son to be kind and curious and brave enough to recognize his father on sight. Thank you for keeping your promise. In her own room, Isabel stood at the window looking out at the quiet street. Somewhere out there, Dominic Ashford had been living his life, building his empire, searching for her. And she had been here, raising their son, setting extra places at the table, dreaming of gray eyes. Her phone buzzed, text messages flooding in. Rachel asking if that really just happened. Her sister calling repeatedly. Headlines already forming if the news alerts were any indication. But Isabel turned it off. Tonight was not for the world. Tonight was for sleeping in a house that finally felt complete. For knowing that tomorrow, Oliver would wake up with his father down the hall. For believing that sometimes, impossible things were just miracles waiting to happen. She fell asleep thinking about phoenixes and second chances, and the strange alchemy that turned 30 seconds into forever. If this story has you in tears, if you're feeling the weight of 4 years of searching and the joy of finally coming home, then I need you to do something for me. Share this story. Share it with someone who has stopped believing in second chances. Share it with someone who thinks they have waited too long or searched too hard or that their person does not exist. And hit that subscribe button, because part 2 is coming, and you will not believe what happens when Isabel confronts her sister, when Dominic meets Oliver in the daylight, and when they realize that building a life together means tearing down walls they have both built to protect their hearts. Drop a comment telling me, have you ever had a moment where you just knew someone was meant to be in your life?